Hi, this is me, and just wanted to have a quick talk about things recently. I was going to do this before, but I haven't had time to do it, which is about two things, really: the riots in London, and also the riots, shall we call them, for a better word, in Libya. And I think I mentioned this previously when I talked about the Middle East crises before. I think I mentioned how it'd be interesting if it happened here, how it would be dealt with. And it's interesting when the things happened in Libya and Egypt and wherever else it was before, that obviously the people, some people, a fraction of people, I mean, we don't know what percentage, that's never been clarified, but a percentage of people stood up against their own government, and they decided they didn't want their own government anymore and took to the streets and took arms, weapons and bombs, and killed people, destroyed property, and took over large areas of land. And this was not sanctioned, I was going to say, this was promoted by the Western governments around the world, especially America and Britain. And then obviously in Britain we had the riots in London, and there only there was a fraction of people who stood up against it might not have been the government, we're not too clear what whether it was to do with the police, whether it's to do with financial crisis, whether it's to do with disharmony within society, etc. But for wanting of a better person to pick, we say the government, and they rioted and they smashed things and broke things. And it's interesting, the British public were telling the police, oh, you should do more, because the police are obviously worried about health and safety and all about being sued and etc. So they can't, they were even worried about using rubber bullets. But it's interesting how the public, who were the vast majority of people, who, if you say that the fraction of rioters were less than 1%, then the 99%, or the majority of people, or the voice of that was being broadcast, was suggesting that the police should be a lot more tougher, they should use rubber bullets. Other people were being even more severe. So it's interesting that what would have happened if, in the same situation as the Middle East, that these rioters had weapons and had used them. What would the government and the police been doing? Would they have sent the army in? Imagine if the rioters had guns, and everyone would everyone felt unsafe anyway. So imagine how if they had guns as well and bombs, and they were deciding they wanted to take over bits of land, and you were loyal to your government, say, and or you just didn't want to be in this kind of terrible situation that no one would want to be in a war type situation, in riots, whatever you call them. And then they have guns. So what would you want the police and the government to do? Would you want them to stop them, or would you want them to let them have their riot, their say? Would you like them to have their guns and shoot people and take over bits of land, take over London, Croydon, wherever, Ealing? Or would you want the government to take arms and deal with the situation? Do you think if this happened, if the rioters did have guns and bombs and were, had more of a protest, more of a political stance to themselves, saying they wanted to get rid of the government, do you think the government wouldn't have sent the army in? Would they? They would have definitely used rubber bullets and gas and water cannons, etc. And we've seen this in America as well, when it's happened in the past, in the 70s. So. And it's interesting, though, when it happens in a country where there's no white people, how we then decide it's a different matter altogether, that it's very terrible, that the government of certain countries, I mean, yeah, I know they might not be democratic, but democratic is a word that's, that's the very Big Brother-esque word that is not, no country is truly democratic. There's no such thing as pure democratic, because you have to have rules anyway, and no country follows those things. We all know that our country and other countries do things that are contrary to what we would consider good, but we tend to class democratic with the word good, and we think that that's the way everyone should be, and no one should be anything else, and anyone who's anything else should be questioned and made to conform to us. So, this has been happening for years with communism and etc. And so it's okay for us to say that the fraction of people in Libya, Egypt, wherever it is, Syria, are the ones that we should back. We should support them financially and give them weapons as well. We will give people who will turn out against their government, whether rightly or wrongly. I mean, this is the thing that the rioters, the question that was to come and say here, that was the way that if the people had an issue, what was the best way to deal with it? Was the best way to deal with it go out and ransack your country? No, it's not, is it? But we say that in Libya or Egypt or wherever, this is fine for these people to do, and we will support them in doing that. Now, the fraction of people that might be doing this could be minimal. And obviously the backdrop story that the news will create or etc. is that this is, a terrible regime and it must be got rid of, and they get the UN involved so it looks like it's all squeaky clean, and we all know the UN has a checkered history. I mean, we only need to look at the Iraq war with Kofi Annan staying silent until afterwards about that it was an illegal war, in the Bosnia episode where they just let people be slaughtered. There's countless movies that have told these stories, and just because they're using them, it doesn't mean that this is all coordinated and right. And it just interested me, the parallels that can be drawn between the two. I mean, I know it's an extreme parallel to draw, and I'm not condoning either. I don't think that it's right for rioting in London. I don't also think it is a beneficial thing to allow people, I mean, we've only got to look at ourselves with the IRA. I mean, did we support the Irish Republic Army in the 70s and 80s and 90s when they wanted to get their bit of country back from the UK? Did we support them? Did we give them guns? No, we didn't. We fought them because it's terrorism. And yet, when it happens in a country where it's not Western, where it's not white, everything's allowed. I mean, there's a good example in I was seeing the film called Outbreak, where obviously it's not a true story, or I'm sure it has happened similar to that, where there was an outbreak of a virus, and it's in Zaire in Africa. And there, it's okay. They don't have any question about bombing the area, setting fire to all of them. It's acceptable. Whereas when it comes to, like, maybe in Los Angeles where it happens, or wherever it is, San Francisco, New York, the idea of blowing up that bit of land with all those people is unthinkable, because there are people. And it's interesting how we see things different, and how certain things are acceptable and certain things aren't. And politicians play with this idea, and I mean, we all know what's going to happen with Libya, like it's going to happen with all of them. These rebels or terrorists, whatever you want to call them, that are causing this kind of action, the same as the IRA did. That now we're apparently we do support them, and we will give them weapons. The same as like we did with Iraq and Afghanistan. So we had the problem. Who gave them all those weapons? We did, to fight each other that we were involved in. And we will end up putting these people in. They will have a duty to us because we supported them financially. They wouldn't have got there without us, and so there's going to be a bargain. And I'm sure this time South Africa's involved in it as well, because President Zuma's been very close with Libya, so I'm sure they're getting something out of it. Probably the contracts to rebuild the country now that it's devastated. And these countries will now be loyal. And that's the only reason why they're supporting them, and maybe there's some oil there as well, who knows. I mean, but it's interesting, the parallels that can be drawn, and how some things are acceptable and some things aren't acceptable. Some things we can support, some things we can't support. Even though, if you actually look at them, I mean, even a better example is if you look at the IRA situation, and you look at the rebels in Libya and the Middle East situation. Why did we support one, but we didn't support the other? Oh, of course, because the IRA, they were bombing us. Take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.